move on to our upcoming session with our guest speaker, Mr. Genie Yuan. Genie heads the Field Engineering Department for Asia Pacific region in Couchbase. He spent his entire career of 18 plus years on delivering data solution in the field. He is also an adjunct professor teaching management consulting and project-based learning in MBA programs. Without much further ado, let's welcome Genie onto our screens. Over to you, Genie.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Depends on where you're joining on the part of the world. Welcome to the session. So today we're going to talk about how industry leaders use NoSQL to modernize the application. A little bit of introduction of myself. My name is Genie Yuan. I'm the head of Field Engineering for APAC in Couchbase. I also am adjunct professor at the university teaching management consulting as well as project-based learning. I had a lot of field experience delivering a lot of data-related projects to different enterprise across a lot of different industry. So feel free to connect me on LinkedIn. Without further ado, let's dive into today's agenda. I would like to give everyone a bit of background and looking at, our acceleration into the cloud. And then we'll talk about the enterprise application requirements. Then I will talk about how Couchbase are addressing all of those requirements and also the use cases as well. And then towards the end, I'm going to show you Couchbase Capella, our database as a service offering. All right, first of all, let's dive into the acceleration. So as you can all understand, starting from 2020, we had the pandemic that really accelerating, changing away how we used to work, how we used to interact. Also for a lot of enterprise and the business, this changed the way how we engage to our customer. This is not only how we feel, but according to a lot of different research, for example, the one that you are seeing on the diagram on the left, we have 451 research showing 83% of the enterprise dedicated their time to update or modernize their mission critical application. At the same time, there are a lot of shift in terms of the priority to the digital experience. On the other hand, the Forster also talks about, in the next 12 months, the top business priority is going to focus on the customer experience. McKinsey say, it's all about consumable buying. As you can see, this shift is mainly putting ourselves towards a digital era more quickly than we thought. As a result, we are now looking at the enterprise application from our customer. They actually told us that in order to deliver a good application out there from a user point of view, they need to be but at the same time, from a development perspective, we no longer have the luxury to take 3 months to capture the business requirements, 1 month for design, 6 months to build, 3 months for testing, end to end, 12 to 18 months project. We can't do that anymore. Nowadays, it's all about agile, lean, the minimal viable product. That means that require our development team to use tools that is familiar and actually that pick up straight away. Right? But at the same time, you actually need the flexibility in your development to respond to the daily changing requirements. At the same time, when we're looking at the deployment options, deployment needs to be efficient. They need to be built, be able to deploy that into the cloud, single cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, even to the edge. Also need to be, what we call the 99.999% uptime. And they need to be distributed, deployed at the global scale. obviously managing that effectively is also a top requirement. How does that translate into a database requirement? From a backend, what we used to have is what we call the legacy demand, that we have a small number of users that build to run on a single server. The good thing is, we have consistency and integrity of the data. That's normally what we call the NC transactions. And we'll also have the storage efficiency. However, at the same time, like what I said, in terms of the digital journey that we are now in, that shop to buy ratio or shop to transaction ratio is extremely high. I don't know what your online shopping experience is, but for myself, I often actually put in a couple of items into my shopping cart when I'm actually shopping online. And I keep doing that for a couple of days, and sometimes I took something out of it if I don't like it. And I don't necessarily to commit a transaction until the date I really need it, and then I actually find it from there, and then I commit. Now, this behavior dramatically changed the backend database requirements. That means now we actually need to deal with a lot more data and a lot more users. And the scale and the performance is very important as well. And at the same time, because use e-commerce as an example, the catalog and, the new items add in all the time. That also require the flexibility to actually change the data schema that we have. And not to mention a lot of, mobile and IoT experience that need to be extended to as well. As a result, we are now actually looking at a much different demand for the backend database. Now, there is a constant debate about NoSQL versus relational database. For those who are not familiar with NoSQL technology, NoSQL is a collective term that talks about a key value database or a document database, and also a graph database. All of them are actually talked in the NoSQL landscape. But now here we're actually focusing on either a wide column or key value data store or a document database here. So we're constantly hearing a debate of, when I build this application, should I use a RDBMS relational database, or should I actually use a NoSQL database? Couchbase actually come up and make a pretty bold statement and say, why can't we have the best out of the both? Why fight? Why can't I have the transaction to support the NC, having the integrity and consistency? At the same time, we have the NoSQL advantage where you can scale easily, you can perform very fast, you can support a lot of different users. Why can't we have both? So what is Couchbase? Couchbase is really a technology consolidator, right? So you can see there is a lot of different icons up here, and later on I'll break it down for you. But at a high level, we are looking at the distributed cache, right? That means is in-memory key value, a document repository that using JSON as a place to store the data. And we're actually using Kubernetes to distribute the cluster. And then we have the mobile and sync gateways to actually looking at how you can have a seamless offline first mobile experience and integrated with analytics. And then we have a SQL engine on top of that. We have change data capture built in so that you're actually notified by every single mutation that's happening in the database. And we have full text search capability as well. So all in all, you have all of those branded in, integrated within a single technology stack. That is Couchbase. Let's look into that a little bit more, and let me break it down for you. So this diagram here is a pretty good diagram that consolidates all of the key functions and features. Let's look at the diagram from inside out. The first three things you see in the red pie is the memory-first architecture with persistent and elastic scalability. So those three are the three fundamental of Couchbase. First of all, we are a memory-first architecture that really gives us the performance scale. And the persist actually help us to be completed as a database. And elastic scalability obviously give us the ability to scale to a much bigger cluster. Now, when we're actually looking at transactions, as I mentioned, Couchbase making a pretty bold claim that we can actually do transactions. At the same time, we are able to get the benefits of all the NoSQL technology. Now, the transaction capability allow us to set the same ANSI transaction standards as the RDBMS. At the same time, you can see the replication down below. Some of you may know what Couchbase or the Couch stand for. That is the COUCH is actually more than just the couch, the sofa that we're looking at, but it's an acronym that stands for Cluster of Unreliable Commodity Hardware. That means when we need to provide the high availability, we need to have the capability to replicate the data. So we have the inter-cluster replication, and we also have the intra-cluster replication. Now, when we actually have those core and foundation, we also have a couple of very key functions that fully integrated with the technology. So let's looking into some of the integrated functionality. So let's start with the key value, the green stuff on the outside ring. So obviously we have the key value store. As I mentioned before, we have JSON as a document. Instead of using like RDBMS, we're using a table to store a record. In Couchbase, we're actually using a JSON document to store the data. So every document counts as a single record. And obviously, the document itself has a key, and then whatever's inside the document is the value. That's where we're actually using the key value store. And also within a JSON document, because of the nature of JSON, and you can see a lot of key value pair, simple and complex key value pair within the document as well. This will allow us to be very flexible to use index and queries later on. For indexing services, we actually had the ability to index the key or any of the keys inside the JSON document. That gives us the flexibility to index at different levels. For full text search, most of the applications nowadays have the search capability. And how they did it is by integrating the database with a third-party search tool, such as Elastic or Microsoft Search Services. Couchbase have our full text search capability fully integrated. That means that you don't need to rely on a third-party application in order to facilitate the search. So everything is integrated, a few buttons, like 2 minutes, you have them enabled, and then you can perform a search. For analytics, that's another very cool features within Couchbase. With every single mutation, analytics services sees the change. That means there is another copy of data that is put into analytics services. Then you can actually do a real-time operational analysis without doing any ETL. At the same time, if someone runs a very long and stupid query, they bring down analytics services, but your key value store is still fully operational, fully functional. On top of that, you actually see query, eventing, and mobile. Query is one of the key differentiators that we have. We actually put a SQL engines on top of a NoSQL database. And this is something that, a lot of our enterprise customer come back and say, thank you, we love the way how SQL interact with us in the past, and thanks for bringing that back into the NoSQL database. So it is an ANSI compatible SQL that you can use. And then for eventing, for those of you who are familiar with the RDBMS world, eventing services is like a trigger, so that you can actually use that, or any mutation comes in will actually trigger the services, and you can actually use that for data enrichment or set alerts, etc., etc. Mobile, very important capability that we have. We have a Couchbase Lite, which is a full feature but lightweight Couchbase. Database you can actually embed with your mobile application. In this case, your application can interact with Couchbase Lite with or without network. When the network resumes, Couchbase Lite will automatically, based on your setting, sync the data back to Couchbase server through the sync gateways. On the outside, you have full stack security, obviously authorization, authentication, at-rest encryption, in-flight encryption, that's a must. Unified programming model will actually give you the capability to interact with all of those services within the pie that we just talked about with the same SDK, and you can access to all of those functions. And we actually touch on the big data and SQL integration and capability, right? You can actually integrate it with some big data tools as well as the data visualization tools. Container and cloud deployments, I think this is probably utmost important nowadays when we actually talk about the ability to scale, to be able to manage different cloud environments or different data center. So what that means is we are actually able to bring a lot of agility to the developers, right? As you can see here, the key value in JSON document gives you a lot of flexibility, right? Also, the memory first architecture, the ANSI operational analytics workload, and then also give you a lot of performance when we actually have the memory first architecture, built-in replication, easy to manage, and we talk about all of those capability. And then very important, automatic cluster rebalancing, location deployment agnostic using Kubernetes, microservices friendly. So those are the key attributes of the Couchbase. It is also get recognized by a lot of third party out there. We are the best database overall. We are best in memory database, NoSQL database. We're also the finalist IoT solution cloud database. We're pretty well recognized in that. You probably argue that we're not really well known in the community, all right? But we actually spend a lot of time working with our enterprise customer for their mission critical application. So before we go and talk about the use cases, let me just highlight something for you. The underlying technology when you deploy that either on-prem or using any of our cloud services, the underlying technology is identical. It's the same technology. Whether you're using our fully managed database as a service called Capella, or you're using Couchbase server deploy using Kubernetes, or install Couchbase server on a bare metal, the underlying technology is identical. That means you can use the same set of developments. You can actually use the cross data center replication to replicate the data between different kind of deployment options. So let's talk about what we did in the market to help our enterprise customers. Even though we are not really well known in the market, we actually had a pretty significant footprint with all of our enterprise customer. In this case, as you can see, we play pretty well in pretty much all industry. I just pick a couple of examples here to talk to you. For example, in financial services, we're actually scanning 65% of global credit card transactions through FICO, right? So they're actually using Couchbase to provide super low latency for fraud detection. So every single credit card transaction is going through, right? Before you actually accept, in that millisecond, Couchbase was actually giving you a risk score. Travel and hospital, well, it will probably deep dive into that a little bit on each of those. In this particular example of Couchbase for travel bookings royalty program, with Amadeus as an example, for those who are not familiar with Amadeus, they are a travel information provider. When you making a booking through your apps, for example, make a flight booking, Amadeus actually at the background providing all of those information about flight availability, the seat, the price, etc. Okay, globally, all the apps are actually using Amadeus to provide the information. So what does that mean in terms of number of transactions and latency? Before pandemic, we are actually supporting 15 million transactions per second. Every second we have 15 million transactions going through with average latency of 4 milliseconds. This is one of the largest global deployments in production for Couchbase. And obviously, you can see a lot of other, travel and royalty program use cases there as well. All right, but this actually showing you one of the key advantage of Couchbase as super low latency with very, very, very high throughput. At the same time, we actually support a lot of online retail application. All right, we actually had a number of retailers in the region that actually use Couchbase as their core retail e-commerce application. We will actually use for the shopping cart as well as the inventory as well as the catalog. So we have a number of use cases in different vendor. In here, one of the referenceable one is Tesco, all right? And a few years back, Tesco actually have a pretty big disaster in one of the Black Friday sales, just because the backend was unable to handle the workload that spike. And with Couchbase support, we were able to scale very dramatically to accommodate those changes. And ever since they actually use Couchbase, they never get blacked out in a Black Friday sales. And as you can see here, we have many other use cases with eBay and Staples and Walmart, etc. That shows us, and they are all using for their mission critical application for revenue generation. We've got some of the very interesting use case with media streaming and telco, right? Examples in AT&T, British Telecom, Comcast, Sky. I think there are a lot of very good use case of caching with session storage that also keep track of rapid changing user preference and selections. So we actually use that to capture all of those details. Again, using our incredible in-memory use case, as well as the SQL capability for them to actually be able to query. Last but not least, I think I briefly mentioned about the FICO one. Again, actually, all the credit card company are actually using Couchbase in different ways. So in this particular fraud detection with FICO, basically we are scanning, as I mentioned before, 65% of the transaction that going through globally every day. And you can imagine how many transactions it is every day. At the same time, super low latency. Allow me to use the last couple of minutes to talk about Capella, right? It is a fully managed database as a service that provide you access to different underlying public cloud infrastructure. That's including AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure. So it is fully managed, but same underlying technology from Couchbase. Automated deployment, management, full failure recovery, upgrades, everything is done by Couchbase. And what you need to do is sign in and get an account, tell me how much node you actually need, and then set up some of the very simple access matrix, and then a cluster will be ready for you. We actually have a free trial for evaluation, Developer Pro for dev and test, and then Enterprise for production. I think there are a number of different use cases. I think I mentioned a couple of them for you, but again, there is no limitation what you can do with Couchbase with those kind of capability. At the same time, as I mentioned, right, very important is fully managed, automated, and then secure. I think security is one of the main concerns out there. We actually have, again, full feature security, encryption at rest and in flight, also encryption on the Couchbase Lite if you actually using that on mobile, and role-based level security, and with multi-factor authentication for key operations. We are able to scale very easily without any downtime. Highly available, fully self-healing, fault-tolerant. I think those are the same capability as the Couchbase server we talked about, but now it's in a fully managed environment. Obviously, hourly pricing, and then we can also have volume discount, and those are that kind of flexibility for you. If you, for example, have some seasonal workload, then you can actually scale up or scale out for only a certain period of time when you don't need those one, and you can scale back down and scale in for some of your workload. And we only calculate it by hourly basis. I guess the reason why we like to push for Capella is the fact that it's much easier for you to start, lower the bar for the entry criteria. It is very fast. It's very easy for you to actually pick up and run. And I think when I actually mentioned those different business requirements, you require something easy to start. You can jumpstart by providing your email sign up. Literally within 2 minutes, you have a cluster up and running. In this database, you have all of those features I talked about, and it's very flexible. And it has the NC transaction if you actually need the integrity of the SQL or the RDBMS, and you have the flexibility to use a SQL, and you have all of those functions fully integrated within the same platform. All right. So from a total cost ownership perspective, is a lot cheaper than using your traditional on-prem solutions. So I think that's kind of the overview. I hope that last 30 minutes is well spent with me. If you want to know a lot more with Couchbase, feel free to visit our website or connect me on LinkedIn. There's only one Genie Yuan on LinkedIn, or actually in the world. So you search for Genie Yuan, you can find me easily on LinkedIn, or visit couchbase.com so that we can have further discussion and see how Couchbase can help you to advance your digital journey on your modern applications. Thank you.